say thank you for running, because it's not easy to run for any office, let alone something like this. So thank you all for stepping up and doing the right thing and being engaged and fighting the good fight. And next we have Lauren Underwood.
Thanks, Christina. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lauren Underwood. I'm also running for Congress here in the 14th District. I'm a registered nurse from Naperville. And like many of you, after the election in 2016, I was stunned to see that Donald Trump had won. At that time, I was an appointee in the Obama administration, was working in public health emergencies and disasters, and knew that I could not stay in government and sort of help the Trump team take away health care coverage from millions of Americans. And so I knew I needed to come back home and continue the work of expanding access to care for so many people. And so when I stayed until the administration to the very end, the last day. It was so sad, very awful. And when I moved back home, I started working for a Medicaid managed care plan in Chicago. And began talking with people and started hearing that the party was looking for someone to run against Randy Holgren. And I was so excited to hear this, that the Democratic Party was paying attention to what I knew to be true, was that there's Democrats here, we're engaged, we're involved, and that we have had a terrible representative for a number of years. And so, like I suspect many of you in this room, I attended the town hall at the Arcada Theater last spring in St. Charles, where Mr. Holgren held his one and only public event. And at that town hall, he addressed a number of issues. But the one that I was most interested in hearing from him on was healthcare. And he promised at that event that he was not going to vote for a version of Affordable Care Act repeal that made it more difficult for folks with pre-existing conditions to be able to afford health care coverage. Now that's important to me because obviously as a nurse I know that health care coverage is critical for people with chronic illnesses who might need to have their medication or be able to get procedures. It's important to me because I work to implement the Affordable Care Act as a federal employee at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. But it's also really important to me because like many Americans, I have a chronic illness, a pre-existing condition myself. It's a heart condition. And while it's well controlled, it's one of those diagnoses where I wouldn't necessarily be able to get coverage under a repeal scenario. So he made that promise before our community, I believed him, and then a week to 10 days later, he went and voted for that American Health Care Act that did the opposite of his promise. And I got angry. And it wasn't because of the vote, it was because he didn't have the integrity to be honest with us the one time he was planning to stand before our community. And that's not what a representative is supposed to do. And so, I decided in that moment, it's on. I am running, and so I launched the campaign in August. Here we are, the last week of January, less than 50 days from our primary election, where we have the opportunity to send forward a nominee to challenge Randy Holgren. Again, Lauren Underwood, so glad to be here with you. Thank you to the Kendall County Debs for voting.
So one of the first things I know that we ask in our county is whenever a county candidate comes up is what are you doing to be prepared should you actually gain that office? And I think that's a question that we're going to start off with here in this panel is what are you doing to be prepared should you be so fortunate enough to go to Washington, D.C. and represent the 14th Congressional District. Things like and in addition, not only are you doing prepare, like are you watching CNN, are you reading transcripts, but also what committees are you interested in possibly serving on? And the third part of that is, what will be your first piece of original legislation?
So as I think about going to Congress, I think about the core functions and duties of a representative, which is to be accountable, accessible, and transparent. So I've been running my campaign to try to achieve those objectives. And we're running a people-driven, people-powered campaign. And it's really powered by the people of the 14th District. And so I think that that's really critical. When I think about another way to be effective as your member of Congress, it's based on relationships. And so we've been building relationships with folks in every part of our district. And hopefully, those relationships will yield dividends once we get to Washington. When I think about committees, healthcare is something that is incredibly broken in our country. And I believe deeply that we need a nurse at the table when we are making the decisions to fix our healthcare system. There are 3 committees in the Congress that have jurisdiction over healthcare in the House, 3 committees. There's Ways and Means, there's Energy and Commerce, and there's Education and the Workforce. And I'd be honored to have a place on any of those committees. And, would submit my name forward and hopefully be assigned to the Subcommittee on Health on any of the 3. And then finally, when I think about early pieces of legislation to offer and send forward, I think we are more than overdue for some movement and some action on 3 basic economic policies that would offer tremendous security for families here in Northern Illinois. Those are things like affordable child care, paid family leave, and equal pay. These are 3 nonpartisan economic security policies that have gotten no movement in the Congress because we don't have representatives and we don't have leaders in the House that are willing to expend their political capital to see them through. It's time for that to change, and the women particularly in our community would benefit greatly. Thank you.
As Democrats, we're all Democrats in the room, regardless of what prefix you want to call yourself. At the end of the day, we're all Democrats. And I'm assuming that you are all familiar with the party platform that was passed in 2016, and you align yourselves with most of that platform, if not all. Is there any issue in particular that you don't agree with?
So, I'm a Democrat. I often get asked, so Lauren, are you a progressive? Are you a centrist? And my answer every time is that I'm a Democrat. And I think that being a Democrat means something. I struggle with sort of the premise of the question, to be honest, because I believe that as Democrats, we need to stand for certain things. We need to stand for choice. We need to stand for public education. We need to stand for healthcare as a human right. Those are just basic things that we all should believe as Democrats, in my opinion. And so that's how I define myself. That's what I believe in. And I can't necessarily call out any particular thing that I would want to walk away from on our platform. Thank you.
Okay, so our next question is, this is one that was prepared by the county. So in your travels, assuming that everybody's out knocking doors, making phone calls, going to meetings like this, what are you hearing most from your potential constituents as the biggest problem that they're facing?
So I get a lot of healthcare questions every day. And the core question that I get is, what can we do to make healthcare more affordable for families? How can we lower the prices of prescription drugs? Do we have the courage to really go to the pharmaceutical companies and attempt drug price negotiations? Do we have the courage to challenge them? And do we have the courage to fight on behalf of families in our area? I get questions about how can we lower premium prices so that if we have healthcare coverage, we can afford to use it. And so this issue of affordability is something that I think is going to be really critical to get some movement on. I think that Washington, and particularly Randy Hochran, has been so narrowly focused on just repealing and not solutions-oriented on the issues that are going to impact the livelihoods and pocketbooks of families across our district. And so they've really missed an opportunity, I think, this year to really help us. They missed that opportunity with the tax plan. That does not help us. And in fact, it only just further destabilizes our healthcare system, right? You all know that in that tax plan was a provision that removed that individual mandate. So when it goes into effect in 2019, we're going to be in a world of hurt. That's not a provision that helps families afford coverage. It's not something that helps families lower their tax burden. It's not a policy that helps families in the slightest. And I hear a lot every day about affordability and healthcare coverage, making sure everybody can get the care that they need and being able to afford prescription drugs. I think we need to really hone in and focus on those policy issues and stop it sort of with all this divisiveness and just trying to implode and destroy programs. It doesn't work well. Thank you.
You know, questions from kids are always the hardest. So this is Blake's question. I'd like to talk right in there.
How do you feel about money for autistic kids at schools? Hi, my name is Blake. I am 8 years old. I live in Plano, and I'm autistic.
Thank you. Very brave.
So Blake, thank you for that question. You were so brave to stand up and ask it. And so many of us don't either have the courage to ask the questions that are so close to our hearts and to our lives, or sometimes we don't have the chance. And so you took the chance, and your mom did too, and so thank you for asking first. I think it's really important, very important, to properly fund our public education system. It's critical, not just for kids like Blake, but for all of our kids. And so all of our schools need to have the funds and the resources that they need so that all of our students can learn in the best way that works for them. And so that means that we need additional resource educators, or they need some special one-on-one attention, or a full special ed program. Each school district needs to have the resources in order to do that. And right now in our system, that is just not the case. We have so much inequality, school system to school system, because of the way public education is funded. At the federal level, the federal government has actually been such a really wonderful partner for our schools in Illinois, because the state has had this inconsistent budget situation. And inconsistent is being generous, right? Because our kids have been used as pawns. And so school districts have relied on the federal funds probably more than ever before. I think that there's a lot more that we can be doing to invest in public schools, not restrict funding from public schools, which is what you will hear coming from our congressman, is seeking to restrict funding from public schools. Now, the question was about autism and education. And for me, that can be special ed, but it doesn't have to be special ed, right? Because there is a spectrum. And so some kids are in the mainstream classrooms, but may need additional help, maybe from that reading or resource teacher, whomever. And we need to be sure that that flexibility exists in each of our programs so that each child gets the education so that they can have the most healthy, well, productive lives. So thanks, Blake, for raising it. Appreciate it.
Okay, so moving on. So there's a question that was prepared by the Kendall County Dems, and the issue is on gun control, or sensible gun safety, is the way I would put it. We certainly hear out, even out in the hinterlands of the we're hear about the situations that occur. It seems to me clearly in schools lately. And the question is specifically in the wake of Las Vegas and other shootings, what is your vision for sensible gun safety? And we'll start with one.
So it's January 2018, and in the headlines, literally every other day this month, there has been another mass shooting. And what has our country done? We barely blinked. We barely blinked. And that to me is unacceptable. We have seen horrendous acts of violence. Horrendous. The Las Vegas shooting, the Las Vegas massacre, Orlando, the Pulse nightclub shooting, Sandy Hook, and on and on and on. I remember I was in 7th grade when Columbine happened. And I remember thinking, there's no way this could ever happen again. How devastating, how awful. And here we are. Here we are. I think it's time, more than time, that we elect leaders who are courageous enough to pursue action. It's not enough to have thoughts and prayers after every shooting and barely blink and go on with our lives. We are far past that. The time is now to act. And so I am for common sense gun legislation that seeks to reduce gun violence. I will say that again. Common sense gun legislation that seeks to reduce gun violence, period. I don't want to infringe on anybody's Second Amendment rights, but this evidence epidemic that we have in terms of gun violence and gun deaths in this country is unacceptable. So I think that we need to absolutely have universal background checks. Universal, meaning if it's a private sale, we need to have a record, and that person should have a background check done. If someone has a restraining order because they have a dating relationship, not just marriage, that should be cause for denial of the gun license, right? We have all these loopholes in our system. I think we need to ban these bump stocks, and I think we need to deny the concealed carry. There's so much work to do. It's time for action. Thank you.
So I'm sure it's no big surprise that there was a march in Chicago. I can't remember now, the days are bleeding together. Was it a week ago? Only a week ago? 2 weeks ago? Something like that? And I believe in the United States, over 4 million people marched in various events on that day. The largest, thank you. It was the largest protest movement or experience that the United States has seen so far. That being said, if we look across this table, there is a gender issue here that is being asked. In the light of the movement, and if the future is female, how do you fit in? Coupled with, I think the question, we combine this with the question of choice, as well as Me Too. So this is a big chunk, but I think it's important to ask.
So I'm going to be real honest with you. I have way more than 2 minutes worth to say on all of the topics, okay? Which is probably not a shot, but here we go. I'm Lauren Underwood. I'm a 31-year-old black woman running for Congress. So all three of these issues are deeply personal to me, deeply personal. So out the gate, I believe that women have an unrestricted right to the full range of reproductive health care services. Unrestricted. And that we need to be fighting every day to preserve that right. And it will be a fight. It is currently a fight, and this is not something that we can just stand by because our rights are being attacked. And you can look at neighboring states and see what's going on down in Missouri, Indiana. I mean, it's unacceptable. And we need to be electing leaders to our federal government, to Congress, that will fight for that right. Number two, Me Too. I want to talk about Me Too specifically for Congress. One of the things I'm really excited about with this Me Too Act that was proposed is the protections that it extends to interns, fellows, and pages. Because I think that a lot of the color that gets overlooked with sexual abuse, assault, and harassment is the level of power and the level of class. And what happens in Congress is that those folks who are on staff but unpaid and don't have any other recourse but to take it if they want to keep their job, that's what's really unacceptable. As elected officials, we need to be held to a higher standard. A higher standard. And that is not currently the case right now in Congress. And so I look forward to seeing that legislation pass and that those protections be extended to all members of staff. On our campaign, we have a zero tolerance policy. It's written in writing. It's given to all employees and really volunteers in our campaign, and that's the way it should be in every company, in Congress, and across our country. Thank you.
One last round. So the winner of this primary is going to be facing Mr. Holcraft. And right now, we all have a choice between all of you and one person who's not here. So what makes you different, and what makes you the person that can beat Randy Holcraft?
So this is a serious job for a serious leader. And my name is Lauren Underwood. I'm a serious candidate running a real campaign to become your congresswoman. I am the only person running in a Democratic primary with federal experience. The only candidate who has worked on Capitol Hill, the only candidate who is ready to go to Washington on day one and be your representative. And that's important because this job that I'm applying for, that I'm speaking with all of you about and running this campaign, it's to unseat a member of Congress who's been in office since 2011. I understand that. And so in offering my experience and my qualifications, I want to be real clear that I bring the background and skill set to do the job. I think it's really important to also look at the support that I've built and really gained in the community. We've been out talking to folks, knocking doors, having conversations and house parties, including ones that are coming up in this very community. And we've been embraced by local activists. We've gotten endorsements from local groups and national groups like Emily's List. They're standing with our campaign. The wave, there's this idea that there's this Democratic wave on the horizon, right? And that we are just going to be swept up in the wave and the Democrats going to win out of this primary. Waves don't just happen. We in this room have to do the work to make it happen. And so we need to have a candidate that will join you in doing the work in our community to make sure that we can beat Mr. Holmgren. And finally, I just want to say I've been so honored to be included in a group of women this year. They call us the Avengers. We're the women that marched in the Women's March and then launched our campaigns. The Avengers are out here in every community. There's Avengers in this room. I'm so honored and glad to join you all this evening. My name is Lauren Underwood. I appreciate your support.